Welcome to another episode of Just More Fix. This is James. With me in this episode is Lacey.
Hey.
You can find us online at justmorefix.com or on Twitter at justmorefix. If you like us, you can support us at Patreon, and you should give us a rating and review at iTunes or wherever you find us at. In this episode, we're going to have a creature feature number 2. And now, it's time to get our gaming fix.
Hi, I'm Stargate Pioneer.
And I'm Steven Jondrew, and we're from Better Podcasting, a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network.
Just like the show you're listening to now.
The opinions expressed are those of the individual host.
Check out all the other podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
And get ready, because geekiness begins in 3,
2,
1.
Welcome to another episode of Just More Fix. Couple quick announcements. First off, as you guys are probably tired of hearing, we have another Indie Game Days coming up, and that will be November 18th from 2 to 6. And we are planning to bring 2 games. First game to celebrate Lacey's hopeful graduation and finishing of her program is...
It's not hopeful. It's happening.
True story. So at Indie RPG Days, you are planning to run...
Tales from the Loop.
Right on. And I am, if all things go correctly, I am going to run a bubble gumshoe scenario that will be Harry Potter based around the first time that the Chamber of Secrets opened up. So.
See, there you go again. Like with your, I'm going to run this Harry Potter based game while you run Tales from the Loop. Like, okay, I might as well set up my game over here next to 7C because ain't nobody going to play it.
Do you want me to not do the Harry Potter thing?
No, I'm just giving you a hard time.
Well, we hope to see you guys out there at Indie Game Days in Terre Haute, and hopefully we can game with you guys a little bit. Second announcement is for any LOTFP fans out there, if you guys are aware, Finland apparently changed the way their shipping rates work to where shipping from Finland is extremely expensive. And there is a special right now that where if you order a t-shirt and use the promo code SHIRTDEAL, all caps, all one word, and they will give you free shipping, and it will open up Lacuna Nature and Punchline to add to your cart. And I got Lacuna Nature at Gen Con this year, and it's a really great book. There's lots of awesome, really cool, trippy, scary creatures that are in there. And Punchline is, I'm assuming, an awesome adventure done by Zarkov Kowalski, because all of his adventures are really good. And the layout and the maps are done by Kyle Chenier, who we are a big fan of as well. So support them and support Lamentations and get some free shipping. Yeah. Awesome. Right on. So today we are going to brainstorm another game, sort of like we did back episode 50-something, 54 maybe, on the creature feature. So we call this Creature Feature 2, and I think this is what we're going to continue to call these episodes, where we game storm a game. That's Lacey's term. And this time I sort of poked around Googling different things for images on Google image search, and I came across this picture that was taken by photographer Thomas G. Anderson, and it ended up being the album cover for a band, Answering Alexandria. The Black is the album. So I'm not really a fan of the band or anything. It just sort of happened to be their album cover. But I was scrolling through these different pictures, and we will link it in the show notes, so you guys can definitely check it out. And he has lots of other kind of creepy, dark photographs and whatnot. The one that we're going to use is, like I said, an album cover for The Black from Answering Alexandria. And it is sort of this tall black figure with what looks like some kind of either cow skull or buffalo skull, something along those lines, right?
I think it's a cow skull.
A cow. And there is a small child looking up at it with a skull mask on as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so we thought we might brainstorm a game from this, just much like we did with the Worms game that came out of the creature feature. So to draw some broad lines around this, initially we've decided this is going to be a more modern game. So whether that's 60s, 70s, 80s, all the way up into the modern times. And that's kind of where we're going to start from.
Yes. I would recommend it be set in Iowa.
Iowa, very good. Or some other place with...
1, because it's rural. 2, because the picture is taken in a field. And 3, because nothing is set in Iowa.
True, there you go. Okay, so the first thing that we decided initially is that
Wait,
we're going to...
JD from Iowa too?
No, but he spent some time there, I think. Why is that so funny?
Because it's just like the most anticlimactic answer ever. Is he from Iowa? No, he also doesn't live there currently, but he was there once.
One time.
I also drove through Kansas.
I needed some silly laughs, so there you go. All right, so I think the first place to start with this is this large creature on the right. So we have this large black robed figure, sort of like really tall, right? Like 12, 15 feet tall, right? Did you think it would look that tall?
I think it's 15 feet tall.
Maybe 12. I think 12 is fair because it looks taller than an adult.
I was going to go with 8 feet tall.
8? Okay,
Yeah.
8 to 10. Seems oddly specific, but it's
not oddly specific. It's like obviously too tall to be a person,
that's
but not so tall that you think it's out of the realm of possibility that it could be a person.
Oh, really? I thought to me it seemed like it was definitely too tall to be a person. Is the way it looked to me.
But not by like a lot.
No, not like crazy, like giant or something.
It's like standing next to a small child.
Right. I thought I was
He's
thinking
about like 4 girls tall, and she's probably all of about 2 feet
3
tall.
feet.
So
No, I was thinking
it's
more
maybe
like
2
3
and a
feet.
half.
3 feet tall.
Okay, fine. 8 to 10.
Yeah. Which is clearly too tall to be a person, though, is all I'm getting at.
You can be a person that's 8 feet tall. It's just highly unlikely. There's an 8 feet tall man. That's like the world record, 8 feet tall.
It also has a skull, like this cow skull thing, right?
Well, it's under a hood, so it could be on top of something else.
I agree.
Human or not.
So, what is this creature, and what does it want from the child? Do you think that's a good place to start from?
Yes, but I disagree with your statement.
Which one?
I think what is this creature is good, but I think that it's not what it wants from the child. I think it's what the child wants from the creature.
Okay. So, let's start with what the creature is
like,
then.
looking up at it imploringly.
Yeah, well, okay. So maybe we should back up and sort
Or
of
maybe it's both. Maybe it's like a mutual relationship.
thing. Well, why don't we back up and just talk about what we see in the picture initially and what sources of inspiration we're going to draw from the picture, right? So first off, the immediate thing that jumps out is there's this imposing black figure that is standing in some sort of either a pasture or maybe a wheat field or something, looking down at a small child, and it has this cow skull. And the child is looking up at it with this sort of innocence, but also fearlessness.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a human skull mask on, right? And when you look at it, do you feel like the child is fearless because it doesn't know the danger, or is it something more than that?
No, because to me, it's more than that, because a child of that age, even if the child is like curious or doesn't know to be fearful, there's still some hint of caution.
Right.
The posture of this child is completely relaxed and like
Right.
looking up at this figure. It's not standoffish. It's
Almost
not
admiration, like looking to please or something, like arms relaxed, looking up, like expecting something almost.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, expectant. I could see that, like, kind of this what's next sort of.
So the age of the child, it's
4,
Between
3 to 5.
Oh, okay, 3 to 5. I can see. I was going to say 4 to 6, but we're right in that range, right? So old enough to know danger, but not really old enough to fully understand danger, right? Which is an awesome age to sort of be at, right?
Yes.
All right. So that's sort of the layout of the initial photograph. So we have this large, imposing figure looking down at this child. So what is it? Is it a nature spirit? Is it a spirit? It's all black.
My
Is
very
it night or death?
first thought was Fae,
Faye, I agree.
like right off the bat.
Mm-hmm. So it isn't necessarily a spirit of one specific thing. It's not like a spirit of death or one individual aspect. It's a broader thing than that, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So does it? If we're going to kind of pursue this, run down this Fae aspect of it, is it something that it needs like a yearly sacrifice of some kind, whether that's like a person or a dish of milk or something like that, or is it something else? Like how does the child fit into the relationship with this Fae?
I kind of, and it's like necessarily like a scary thing, but do you know how, like almost like the unintentional summoning? So not necessarily as dark and ominous as Hellraiser, but you have the same sort of thing in like the Labyrinth, right? Where you're like, Goblin King, take this
right on.
child away from me,
Right.
So maybe there's an unintended summoning or what have you. And
right on.
so now we're trying to satisfy whatever this childlike whim is that maybe is not evil in intent, but in execution.
It might be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's zero in on what that whim is then. So what is the source of this whim? Is it something towards, we're in a rural area, right? So it could be towards, if you live on a farm or something in the rural area, oftentimes you have a lot of chores and things that you have to do. Is it?
I want something even more benign than that. Like, what does a child that age want? They want a friend, someone to play with.
Okay. So it
companionship,
is right
something
on.
like that. So maybe rural area parents are working, busy, that kind of thing. So then you have kind of
siblings.
also this moral, like, neglecting the home, and that's what's caused this inevitable sort of.
So, I think if you have a child, though, that is lonely and wanting companionship, you have one of two situations. Either they are an only child, or they are a child who has a big age gap, maybe. So this kid is very young in the picture. So maybe if they have siblings and they're much older, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think if there's older siblings, it makes it more interesting. Does it make sense? Because there's more potential for things to go wrong or more potential for people to not believe things, but are still young enough to maybe have their reality be a little more flexible than an adult, maybe.
That could be interesting.
Right on. Okay, so
I also like the idea of having someone involved. Like when Dave ran his game, you had these children, and then you had this character that was much older. And I don't see a lot of older characters in games, so I think it would be interesting to incorporate some kind of like wise woman or wise man sort of character that maybe believes the child and like remembers old stories or myths or something like that.
Okay, so
maybe like another family member that.
Right. Well, we've set this up maybe that there's a large age gap, right? And it's we're going to do like a more of a modern scenario here. So perhaps this is a second marriage with a child, another child. So maybe there's a big age gap there, right? So we have older parents, and then maybe they have an older grandparent in the house. And that would
maybe it doesn't even have to be like the actual child's parents. Maybe you can get something like Coraline, where you have her and her parents, but then you have her friend Wybie, and his aunt is like, don't go over there. Like, it's not okay to be there.
So like a neighbor in that case, is that what you're talking about there?
Yeah, like something like that.
Okay.
Or another community member.
So why do they know about this creature then?
Well, the most obvious one is that it's been here before.
Yeah, clearly. I think that's how that gets set up. So I don't want to focus on what this creature has done, but let's focus on initially what happened, like the outcome of things, not how it got there, but what ultimately went wrong. Like, were there like 14 dead, or was it something, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Well, hang on. So it's looking down at this child. So maybe we should start off not with what went wrong the first time, but what it wants from this child. And that will lead us more towards what could have went wrong the previous time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what does it want, and what does the child want to give it? Because almost with every Fae story, there's some sort of agreed exchange of things that's going to happen, right? So what is it that they want from one another, or are expecting from one another?
So in the Fae relationship, I really like it when it's things that hold meaning but aren't necessarily in and of themselves of value.
Right. Yeah. More of a symbol.
Mm-hmm.
A symbol for what, though?
I don't know. Depends on what the creature wants to have. So let's look at its appearance and think about its appearance.
Okay.
Like, what does that figure say to you without the little girl there, like when you see it?
So I think what immediately jumps out to me is something that you mentioned initially. We kind of talked about a little bit in the pre-show about trying to figure some things out in some broad strokes for this, right? And you mentioned how there's this fearlessness in the child that is of an age to where it should be it should know enough to be scared, right? So I think that maybe it's the Fae hasn't always been this elder ancient Fae creature, right? It was a child at one point too. And its ultimate goal is to be replaced so that it can move on to something else and go rest or whatever. And that is why it has put this child at such ease, as when it looks up at it, it doesn't look up at it in a way of fear and terror. Or even just like stranger danger, I need to get away from you. Not abject terror, but being concerned and worried and seeing danger. It's just very relaxed, right? So maybe it wants the child to take its place, and something has to occur to make that happen. And maybe the child doesn't even know that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's going to do something through whatever it is, and then that will lead to it replacing what this thing is. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Do you like that?
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to make it the action that has to happen. I don't want it to be something so much as like feeding it another child, because that's kind of boring and sort of overdone and cliche, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it needs to be something that is, one, more interesting than that, but also I think maybe something that isn't within the realm of possibility that a child could do, but would take an extreme amount of effort to make it happen.
But when you talk about a Fae creature, you're talking about something that is beyond time.
Right.
So a story that I really liked is this, I can't remember what it's called, but it's one of Neil Gaiman's short stories. And in this story, there's a boy who happens to stumble upon this bridge, and the troll lives there. And so this troll is like, I'm going to eat you. I'm a troll,
right,
or whatever. He's going to kill him. I'm forgetting most of the fuzzy details, but, and so he's like, whoa, just wait, like, there's all these things that I still wanted to do first. And so then the troll's like, okay, but like you have to come back here and
after you've done those things.
Yeah. And so then like he goes off and he kind of forgets about it. Like maybe it's a dream, I was young, weird things were happening. But several times throughout his life, he finds himself back in this spot. And then every time he's like, well, just wait. I have this other thing that, these other things that I still haven't done. But then eventually he comes back to the bridge, and he's kind of at this point in his life, and he's, whatever, like sad or depressed, and okay.
Accepts his fate.
Mm-hmm, accepts his fate. And then what ends up happening is like this troll creature turns into something else and walks away like a regular person, and he becomes the troll under the bridge.
Okay, right on. Well, okay, so you mentioned troll, and I was going immediately, as soon as I hear troll and fairy tale, my favorite that I have found is from the Changeling the Lost core book, where the long and short of a story is that there are three brothers who are trapped in cages, and there's a troll who's going to butcher them and eat them. And he butchers the first one and butchers the second one, and there's some dialogue that happens and whatnot. But the third one escapes and kills the troll with knives, with the sharp knives that get talked about a lot, and butchers and kills the troll, right? And then he stands there with the knives in hand and then begins sharpening them to make sure that they are extremely sharp so that he can butcher the next person that gets put in the cage. And in the same way, what you just mentioned, he takes the role of the troll. Now, in that situation, he kills the other one, but takes his place. So it's sort of like a replacing ritual almost, right?
Right.
I really like the idea of that, of like this story that perpetuates itself, like this cycle, but you don't necessarily know how long it goes on for. But at some point, whoever this was will be released, and then you will take their place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so then that kind of changes it, because you're not on this, I need you to do this one task. It's more of a becoming gradually thing, and it doesn't necessarily have to happen now or.
So if it's going to be this becoming thing, right? One of the common pieces with that is that they sort of accumulate items or things that have a connection to the past, or what make this creature what it is. And in the case of that troll, it's the sharpening of the knives, right? And in the case of the story you mentioned, it's this returning to the bridge and this constant returning. But I've got one more thing to do. I've got one more thing to do. So what is the recurring thing that is happening, or the items that this child wants to get a hold of to make it fulfill this cycle?
Well, I think it should involve something to do with like an animal, whether it's, something that happened in this field, but you have this large animal skull,
Right.
and then you also have this skull mask. So I feel like some kind of death, or like a large animal sacrifice or something.
Well, it's definitely death is involved because of the human skull and then the animal skull. So is it man becoming animal because the child has the human skull and the creature has this cow or buffalo or whatever skull it is?
It could be.
What?
No.
What?
I was just thinking, like, what's the worst thing that you could picture, like, a small child doing? And I feel like probably eating a family pet would be.
I totally think we go there.
Or maybe a barnyard goat or something.
Goats are always great symbols because it ties in.
When it makes a good skull, too, right? Like with the horns and everything.
Yeah. Oh, no, it totally does. But there's so much stuff with goats, scapegoats, sacrificial lambs, the Baphomet, all that stuff. It totally.
The black goat.
Yes. 1,000 young, all that stuff. I think it totally ties in. It makes sense. Eating the household pet is really cool and terrible. Hey, everyone knows we like dark games. It's no surprise, right?
But I think it has to happen in this field.
Okay. So is there a specific connection to this field? Like, is there something that happened here before?
I think it's less of a connection to this specific field as a general sort of nature connection. And so it needs to be happening in this remote area. Like maybe not like this specific field. It's probably locational, like this region, but not this specific field. But I think that, like this needs to happen outside of the child's normal home environment.
So let's just imagine a situation where we are some kind of this fey creature, right? Who has been tricked previously and now is on the path to try and trick someone else into doing their bidding so that they can be freed, right? Mm-hmm. So how is it that we trick this child into eating some sort of household or farm animal? I think it almost has to be a farm animal because it is the skull of this cow goat creature, right? And so if it was a dog or a cat, it would very clearly look different. So this is some sort of farm animal, right? So how does it convince it to kill or sacrifice? And I think eating an entire creature seems a little like that's a lot, right? So maybe they have to consume the heart or.
But I think it has less to do with actually eating the creature and more to do with
the sacrifice itself,
with transitioning from being a human to being a bestial natural creature. And so, perhaps it's less of a tricking and more of a, maybe like this creature kills this goat in the field, and maybe there are other animals that are part of the scenery, that are part of the habitat that are eating this creature, and then the child is like partaking in that as well. So be it like coyotes or badgers or anything you can imagine living in a general field type area, carrion birds.
I think,
and then so it's almost like a feast with the creatures of the wild.
There's this weird, terrible vision I have of
a wild rumpus, if you will.
of a like more or less, turned to be loosely sacrificed goat or cow or something laying out and being feasted on by carrion birds and this child and whatnot. So I get, something we have kind of overlooked, this skull, is it a real skull? Is it a mask, like a paper mache plastic mask of some kind? Or
I think it's a real skull that is a mask.
So is it the creature, this new embodiment, is it its old skull?
I don't think you get to know that. It's kind of like Hester, right? Where you look and like you can tell like it's a mask and there's something under there, but you don't ever really get to know what it is.
Okay.
And even if you could, it would probably break your mortal feeble
No.
brain.
I'm not talking about the creature itself. I'm talking about the skull that the skull mask the child is wearing.
The skull mask the child is wearing?
Yeah. So is that the skull of the former child from before? Or is it just a mask that it has and it's sort of trying to emulate it? Or is it, like in a non sort of supernatural sinister way, it just has a mask, like it's Halloween time and it wears a mask?
No, I think the mask is something that the creature would give it when it's like selected. It's a gift to the child.
I like the idea that if it's passing from one to the other, that it's giving its own skull to this child, right?
I like that.
That's really kind of trippy and creepy and awful, but I like the idea that, like, in order for it to pass on its legacy, it has to get the child to wear this mask and then perform whatever ritual, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe, what if the ritual the child performs is the ritual that this creature continues to reenact, right? And the way that it gets to be released is by getting another child or another person, child, adult, whatever, to create this ritual.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what is the ritual and what does it serve? Do we want to stick with a thing where like there's this, I like the idea of the sacrifice and sort of the carnal nature of it, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But does it serve a higher purpose than just...
No, I think you're thinking too small. You're thinking ritual like I melt this shit in this bowl and then I drink it. No, like the ritual is a multi-step process, right, and the child has to go through all of these different tasks in order to complete the process.
Right. Okay. But the culmination is this feast that happens, right?
No, I think that's step one.
Oh, all right. All right. So,
well, I guess step one would be the passing of the mask.
Okay, right.
So let's call this step two.
Step two. All right. So the first part is finding this mask and getting the child to wear it, not be scared of it. Mm-hmm. So without going like too deep in the weeds, because I think there's a lot of potential if we're going to make this into like a role-playing scenario.
I think this creature too should be able to manipulate dreams.
Yeah. Well, it's very, very fits with a very fairy tale and fae kind of a thing, right?
Well, plus it's got like this black robe, and sort of like puts you in the mind of like night and darkness.
Passing between worlds.
And so like maybe, as I say, the veil is thinner at night and that kind of thing. So maybe it can communicate a little more clearly.
Through dream
and give the child kind of some ideas about what they're supposed to be doing or put thoughts in their head.
So I have this, in order to get a child to wear a skull, right? I think you have to give them some kind of story or something for why they would wear it, right? So I think there's this confession where the creature tells them that used to be me, but now I'm invulnerable and my skull will protect you. So if you wear it, you can be invulnerable too, right? Sort of like the seduction and giving of power and protection.
I don't like the creature having direct speech.
Well, no, I think this would all be done through like dream metaphor, maybe, right?
Yeah, like imagery.
Uh-huh.
Like almost like the superhero sort of like, I give you this and now you can leap tall buildings.
Well, maybe not that specific, but like there would be a way for them to, or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's not that it will give it powers and make it invulnerable. It's that this child is lonely and it wants a friend. And if it wears this mask, it gives it a connection to it. And now, if it has this skull mask, it can interact with it outside of the dream world. Mm. I think that makes it a little more plausible there.
I picture kind of like, I just lost I can see the purple and the max.
Oh, yeah.
How it's like existing in this sort of like make-believe kind of cartoonish. Mm-hmm. And so then that's kind of the dream world where it almost makes more sense and is more tangible than the real world. And this creature is better able to communicate like its thoughts and feelings and things make sense more there. Being able to pass ideas back and forth.
Right.
But then in like the real world, things get like a little bit muddled.
So I think that ties back into like initially what I said, where if the child wears this mask, it makes it like a conduit so it can, in the real world or outside of the dream world, in whatever sense that is, that it can communicate easier and has a better connection, right?
I think it should convey some other kinds of powers too. Like we should see this child become more like physically and mentally powerful as the time progression goes. So not only can it like see this creature better and communicate with the creature better wearing the mask, but maybe it gives it some kind of other ability also.
Like what?
Maybe some kind of like empathic ability as far as knowing what like regular people are thinking or feeling or desiring. Because that seems like it would be a useful thing for a creature to have that wanted to manipulate individuals.
True. And it also seems like a useful thing for like a lonely child to have that feels excluded. So it knows what its elder siblings want, its older step siblings want to have or want to know. It also, so that it can get some sort of positive interaction, right? At the same time, I think in this scenario, there's parents that are very busy, right? And it does the same thing for them. So there's a way for it to sort of interact with the world and the other things that are around to get more positive affection and attention in an empathic way, knowing what they want, right?
And that also comes with kind of unique opportunities to create other emotions too, because sometimes the things that people want are not things that are appropriate for the knowing of a young child. Or, maybe, I go and ask dad for something and the response I get is go away, child, and leave me alone, and the kind of repercussions that has.
Okay. So we sort of established the first step is getting to wear the mask, right? Or wear the skull itself, and that conveys these empathic abilities. So I think in terms of the way things generally go, 3 is a very common ritualistic number that players will pick up on. So the first step is wearing the mask. The sacrifice or the feast or whatever you want to call that. Is that 2 or is that 3?
I think that's 2.
That's 2. So what is so there has to be some moment where a creature, whether that's goat or sheep or cow or whatever, is taken out and killed, sacrificed. And is the heart consumed, or like the heart's blood moment, or is there something else? Or is it just the act of sacrificing it enough?
I think the act of sacrificing is enough. I don't think you have to get specific about which entrails are being
right. Well, heart's blood is a very common thing where they have to take a bite of the heart or whatever, but it would seem kind of hard for a child to be able to carve the heart out of anything, let alone a cow or something. That's a lot. So what is the third step then, the final step to make this, to seal this ritual of transference to happen? What is that?
I think the third step is the choice to completely leave the previous life behind and enter into this contract or ritual or whatever it is you want to call it. I think it can only be done by choice. So
I think there's two reasons to have this happen, and it could be either one. First off, the one is this entity has befriended this child so much to where they want to alleviate its suffering and set it free and take the burden on of this role, right? So that's the first scenario. The second scenario is that it wants to do it because the child wants this power and authority. So what is the power and authority that it would be assuming?
Well, we talked about escalating power. So we've given the child this kind of empathic knowledge about other people. And so then you had this ritual where this animal is consumed. So I think that should come with other powers as well. And I think the most interesting one, I think, is like an animalism, like think Vampire the Masquerade animalism power.
So they can speak with animals and summon them.
Yeah. So now I have a whole field full of friends. I can command animals. I can talk with them. I can call them to me to do my bidding kind of thing.
Okay, so is there anything more sinister happening in the background, or is it just that they can sort of have these animals at their beck and call to do what they want?
I think that's sinister enough when you're 4.
Right, but in terms of like making it gameable or whatever, like why would the players be involved in checking out what's happening?
I don't know if I see it as a scenario so much as just making an NPC that is interesting that they can encounter at any stage during this process.
So you're saying that they encountered this Fey spirit thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Or maybe just the child, or maybe both.
Right. So, okay. So in that situation, what is it that they are... Why would they be encountering the spirit? What do they want from it, or what does it want from them?
I think it depends on what kind of game you want to run.
Well, but like
are you running a changeling game? Or are you running a Trail of Cthulhu game?
Well, all of the above, any of them.
But the motivation is completely different. It's not the same at all.
Well, no, but I mean, we have to have somewhere to work from, so...
I don't know. Why am I making all the decisions? You make a damn decision.
Okay.
Stop just asking me questions. Like, your job is so easy right now.
True story. I've added a little bit, not a ton, but I have, bounce some ideas back and forth off of you. So, to me, I feel like we've made more of a changeling kind of thing happen here. I don't feel, it doesn't, like initially, if it was Trail of Cthulhu, it would seem more sinister, I think, right? There would be more murder and mayhem and reasons for you to go investigate this. You know what I'm saying? So to me, it seems more like a Changeling the Lost kind of a moment here. And we've talked a lot about dreams and how like the dream world being where this creature's power really lies. So whether this creature's encountered in Changeling Lost or any other game that involves sort of like an otherworldly entity, right? I think we sort of need to make a reason why the characters would encounter this creature. We sort of built up what it is and where it comes from, right? But why is it that our characters are involved with this entity, or why are they encountering it now? So maybe I think it has to want something larger or need to do something larger.
But in Changeling though, like true Fae, the main objective is to avoid them at all costs and not get stolen and taken back. So it's not really a reason to interact with this creature. It's more a reason to avoid this field and region completely for all of time.
Well, if you want to take the true Fae aspect of it, then it would just sort of consume these children, and it would, I guess it wouldn't ever actually leave. It would sort of like absorb them into itself, and it would continue to exist as it is, continuing to try and steal children, essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I'm cool with that. That makes sense. But is there a way to stop this cycle then? I guess that's immediately where my mind goes, right? If this is a true Fae that just continues to consume children over time, slowly, right? Not a lot of children, but just enough to sort of feed it and sustain it. Is there a way or a reason to stop it? Or does it just continue to devour children and sort of abduct them and consume them forever?
It's not consuming them. It's recruiting them.
I think that's a tomato argument.
Consuming is like an eating.
Well, no, but like consuming, like it's absorbing them into itself, right?
It's not. The child is becoming it.
So does it just end there?
No, I don't think there's anything you can do about it. That's the point of the Fae. Like it's like an elder god. Like no, there's nothing you can do about it. You're going to try and you're going to struggle and you're going to fail because you are man and it is not.
You're trying to, it's the bacon and sandals morality.
Right. Yeah.
Our morality is based off good and evil, and theirs is based off of bacon and sandals. Why? Because you just can't understand it. It's not possible.
So yeah, I don't know what you want to do with that, but
all right. Well, I think, are there any other unanswered questions that you can think of that sort of relate to this entire sort of weird, trippy scenario? I sort of think of, if it's a Trail of Cthulhu or a Conspiracy X game, right? There's this string of missing children that has happened, right? So you get called in to investigate it. Now, if you realize that it's this sort of otherworldly elder god thing, it's not necessarily a matter of stopping it. It's just sort of containing it.
Mm-hmm.
So is there something else that it wants besides to be relieved that makes it sort of tick, for a lack of a better word?
Well, I think whenever you get kind of this natural spirit, and then there's like a territory that goes with it, the encroachment of civilization upon that territory is always a good motivating factor that makes sense. And,
No, I think it totally makes sense that there's this, we mentioned being in sort of like the rural heartland of America, for lack of a better term, area where wheat fields and bean fields and whatnot and pasture. So the encroaching civilization on the territory of this creature is what sort of drives it and makes it more desperate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if there's no stopping it, is there a way to sort of make it complacent? Like, well, maybe that's not even the right word to use.
I guess maybe not, there's no stopping it. Just nothing that, no like single action you can do. So most things having to do with like fairy tales and mythology, they're fueled by belief, right? And so as things encroach upon it, the less power it would have, and the more sort of disregard that others show for this power, the less that it has.
It almost gets more desperate,
right?
Because
it's being, its livelihood is being threatened.
So I feel like there needs to be some larger thing that it's going to set out to do. Like, what is its ultimate goal, I guess? I think it has to be related to somehow death or decay because it has this skull, right?
I like the tie-in, though, like with sort of a modern day, like environmental kind of push. You know what I mean? I don't want to do like a total M. Night Shyamalan, this is all pollution's fault kind of thing. But,
right.
like if you can tie it into topics that are relevant to today. So it might be interesting where you see kind of like in the Dakota area where they were doing like the stuff with the pipeline. This is farther south, but I imagine there's a similar sort of, maybe it's strip mining versus.
There's a million reasons,
some kind of environmental protection kind of argument, activism component there.
So it wants to stop the encroachment of man, essentially onto nature.
And it's not an unintelligent creature.
Well, no, and then I guess there could be a part of it that you could say like the cycle of life, and that it is this old creature that is the face of a skull of a beast, right? And it always seeks out children. So it's seeking out the young, the vibrant, the new in life. Like it's like this sort of cycle that perpetuates itself. So maybe it's almost like this tragic, this like tragedy of like it knows that it's sort of crushing itself under its own weight, and that it always finds the new and the young to take its spot for whatever the contemporary problem is. That doesn't, you know what I mean? Does it make sense?
Well, it's not a contemporary problem. Like encroachment of civilization is always the problem.
Right. But I guess it happens in different.
It's the man versus nature kind of.
Right.
Kind of backwards, I guess. Nature versus man.
Yeah.
But you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. I really like the idea of the dream world, though. Like, that's one of the things in all the Changing the Lost games that we've done. I wanted to incorporate it more, the dreamscape stuff, but just never did. And I feel like it's sort of this tendency to just go towards what's happening in the real world as opposed to what's happening in the dream world, even though it's super interesting and trippy and really cool to do, like that Inception moment. But I think the default is to just go to what's actually happening. So it makes it hard. I like the idea of this being sort of a character that you might encounter in a dream world that is sort of surreal, and its motivations feel sort of otherworldly in that way. Like, why is it doing this? I don't really know. It just sort of does. It's just what it does. It's a cycle that it goes through of this sort of birth, life, and rebirth that it just sort of goes through in this sort of weird, perverted version of what its own birth is, right? Its own birth is coming from where this visage of death, and then make this sacrifice, and then willingly become me, right? It's this weird, I don't know. I feel like we've made a better concept for a strange, weird fairy tale than an actual game, but it's sort of trippy and weird. I don't know.
But I like having mythology to build a game around. It makes the world more interesting.
Right.
So whether, you use it as an NPC or whether it just informs the culture that operates around this world.
Okay, so let's just sort of, for now, draw lines around what we've set out right now, right? If you were to use this for your own game and incorporate into it in some way, whether that was Tales from the Loop or Trail of Cthulhu or anything, how would you do that? Like, what would you use it for? Would it be just like this really weird, trippy encounter? Or would you build a scenario around what's happened? Do you know what I'm saying? I can see several scenarios where there's competing interest in civilization versus sort of a more wild world happening, right?
Mm. I know we kind of built this up as a changeling thing, but it got me thinking that it would be a really, really super interesting Orpheus fumigation mission.
We haven't mentioned Orpheus in like 4 episodes.
So,
Probably
I know,
do,
but
right?
Maybe it's not, because the difference between changeling and ghost really is so
It's very thin. It's true.
and it'd be very easy to take this sort of character and change its story to make it some kind of ghost creature. And then, maybe there's a urban development project. They're wanting to build a set of subdivision houses in this field or whatever. And now you have not only maybe one, but maybe you have like this, instead of lost boys, lost children that are associated with this main creature as well.
It's like a specter by itself, and it's just continually producing these lost boys by having it wear the skull and make the sacrifice.
Like a hive of children.
That's really cool. That could be very cool and very dark for sort of like a Conspiracy X or an Orpheus game or whatever. I was going a different way. I was actually thinking Tales of the Loop. Like maybe the child that is going to go through this process is my younger brother, right? And I've got to stop it from happening. Or maybe it is in the process. Like maybe I think it makes more sense to have it either halfway or more than halfway through completion, and now there's problems happening and there's these weird manifestations or something going on in this sort of Goonies style whodunit investigation moment, where whether that's Bubble Gumshoe or Tales of the Loop or Kids on Bikes, right? You're trying to solve this mystery of what's happening. I like the idea of having the desire be to whether to stop this cycle or let it continue happening with someone's little younger brother, right? Or younger sister or whatever that is. Right on. Well, you think that's it?
I don't know. I don't know anything else.
Right on.
I feel like it went in a very different direction than our other one did, because I kind of ended up in like a solid sort of scenario thing.
Well, I agree, but this one was a much more, we had in the one before this, we sort of had a more concrete idea when we started. And this one was just sort of, I found this neat picture. Hey, what do you think? Let's see where it goes, right? So whether this turns into it's a weird, cool NPC for you to have, and it's entirely possible that you build this creature thing, right, for your players to encounter, and it has this wicked cool backstory that they never encounter. But at least it gives you a position from, if they encounter this creature, a different place for you to understand where it negotiates from, right? And I think that those characters and NPCs and creatures that they encounter are always more interesting if they have deeper motivations and you know where they come from, whether the players do or not. Or maybe it gives you a reason for them to make strange requests on the players because they just can't understand what this creature actually wants because it operates on a bacon and sandals mentality, right? So, well, as we set out in the beginning, we kind of said we were going to just sort of brainstorm something and see what happened. And hopefully, maybe this will be useful to you. I don't know. I think it might make for a cool Tales from the Loop, much more sinister Tales from the Loop than you would normally encounter, maybe, scenario.
More sinister.
Yeah. But I think there's definitely something there. So, well, maybe we will revisit this and come back around to it and use it for something else. It's just sort of a cool moment to see sort of how we put our stories together in places that we draw inspiration from and sort of see where they go as we put ideas together and sort of trying to connect the dots. Maybe you guys can get something useful out of this, and hopefully you can use it for an NPC or a cool encounter for your players. And if you use it for anything, let us know how it goes. We are a member of the Gunna Geek Network, and you guys can check out many other awesome episodes and podcasts at GunnaGeekNetwork.com. And You guys can support us at patreon.com. And big thanks to our Patreon supporter, Todd, for supporting us at Patreon and being awesome. Everyone else should be awesome like Todd. And as always, we will catch you guys next week. Thanks for listening. This has been an episode of Just One More Fix. Music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find him at incompetech.com. You can support us at patreon.com/justonemorefix or follow us on Twitter at JustOneMoreFix.